Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, testing.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to call this meeting, the JWB, to order. Chief, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance? To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, let's begin with the acknowledgements. JWB volunteer recognition. Danielle.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Danielle Hintz. I'm the Community Collaborations Manager here at JWB, and I've been with the organization for just over 20 years. I'm really happy to be here to recognize our volunteers today. We are fortunate within our unit and also across JWB to have dedicated volunteers that come in weekly and monthly. In addition to, we host volunteer packing parties and other things throughout the year. So I know you've seen that posted on social media, and I wanted to just take a moment to recognize those folks who are coming in here every week or every month to volunteer with us. Within our unit, as I was saying, they're really an important part. We do so many different things that are outreach throughout the community, including our grade level reading campaign, childhood hunger initiative, preventable child death campaign, which includes the Sleep Babies Safely campaign, as well as our fatherhood collaborative. And then in addition, our children's mental health initiative, as well as when we do our out of school time conference. These folks are coming in on a regular basis to get things ready to put out into the community to support our campaigns. And I wanted to also mention Joanna Maniscalco is a community collaborations coordinator within our unit, but she's also JWB's volunteer coordinator. And she has her professional project management professional certification, which helps her be very efficient in working across all of these initiatives, as well as supporting our volunteers. And she's been with JWB for over 15 years. Joanna, I think, is out of the room at the moment, but I want to recognize and have you know that what she does is part of her work here. I'm going to focus on some highlights. So when you look at these numbers, they're pretty impressive. Just in the first 2 quarters this year, over 3,000 welcome baby bags were stuffed and distributed to our local birthing centers and the hospitals. Over 3,400 books were given out, and they also do things like the Family Time in a Bag kits for our Fatherhood Collaborative. And in just this 6-month period alone, 288 volunteer hours were contributed. That's a huge value to JWB. And as mentioned, while we do our regular packing parties and other things where people can come in from the community, we have 4 volunteers who are here. And the reason Joanna's out of the room, one of our volunteers I'll speak about in a moment as she's awaiting her. But first of all, our first volunteer I want to recognize is Leslie Goss. Leslie, if you can wave. Leslie has been with us for over 10 years, and she retired from a career in social work and came to JWB and is dedicated and diligent every week. Leslie accomplishes a lot. You can give her kind of any task, and she's on it, so we're very grateful to have Leslie here with us. I'm going to check to see, we're awaiting Rachel Glander. So Rachel, next slide, that's great. Rachel has been here for over 3 years of providing some really enthusiastic service. She loves coming in and helping and has said, she's finally found a place where she feels that she can contribute and it's really meaningful to her. It's an outlet. The reason that Joanna's out of the room and Rachel is not here yet is she has to take public transportation, a specialized service to get here, and that shows the dedication. Yeah, I'm sorry that she's not in the room at the moment, but that gives you an idea of what it takes. It takes her often over an hour to get here and to get home, even though she lives in Largo. Because of the transportation, you never know exactly when they're going to pick you up. But she comes in, big smile on her face, and is here twice a week, doing anything she can to help. She loves reading, so she especially loves affixing stickers to our books. And we give out, just at the book bus alone, we'll give out 10,000 books this year, and she's stickering other books that go into community libraries and events out in the community. So I hope that she was excited to be here today. I hope that she's able to pop in before the meeting goes on. Okay, our last two regular volunteers have a very familiar last name. They are energetic, a dynamic duo. They come in every month to do packing of baby bags. These are my parents, Dan and Shirley Hintz. So I'm really proud to have them as volunteers and great cheerleaders. They've done many other things in their career. My dad served as sheriff in the town where I grew up. My mom worked for the local housing authority in Clearwater here once they came and moved to Florida from the Midwest, and they volunteered other places, but I'm just so proud that they'd want to come and volunteer here at JWB. So I'm going to just peek to see if Rachel has arrived yet. Thank you. And if not, we will send along our congratulations and just appreciate that we've had these volunteers. And on average, 50 hours a month is given to JWB from our volunteers. So I want to say thank you and for listening to our presentation, and just wanted to raise your awareness of how we get things done across the board at JWB. Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the board, I would again like to thank you for all the hard work and service that you give to this community. It really means a lot to the children of Pinellas County. And it's just amazing that you can take the time out of whether you're retired, your schedules, the like, to come in and really do something to benefit those children. It's just amazing. So again, thank you so much. Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. Assuming everyone had a chance to review, do I have a motion to approve?
So move.
Second. I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion's approved. Moving on to the presentation of the FY24 budget and forecast. Laura? Oh, but first, let's congratulate Laura again for her amazing award.
Thank you. Good morning. Laura Kruger-Brock, CFO at Juvenile Welfare Board. So we are here today to have a discussion and a presentation. This is not an action item, to kind of discuss a variety of things. We certainly will have a more in-depth discussion with the Finance Committee, which is scheduled later this month, June 22nd. But we wanted to go through where we are at this point in time. We've recently learned that the estimated increase in the property values from the county just came out last week. So that modified and changed a lot of things that we had to work on. So we'll discuss the budget timeline. I'll kind of go over some of the different forecast assumptions that we have. So everything's always a moving target. We're looking at millage rate. We're looking now at earnings on our investments. We are forecasting some rate of returns in that respect. We continue to look at program continuation, COLAs, both on a staff level as well as a program level, capital RFA funds. There's just a variety of things that go into this presentation. So just kind of walk you through the timeline and the budget. And this is not new to any of you, but June 1st, which was last week, we received the taxable values, property values from the county. Today is June 8th, and we're meeting with you all to kind of present the draft fiscal 24 budget. The 22nd is the Finance Committee meeting. We'll have a little more in-depth details of the budget. And then July 1 is when the county will certify the taxable value. So we'll know for sure July 1 what those taxable values will be. We have a board meeting on July 11th, and at that time we will be approving the proposed fiscal 24 millage rate. So I wanted to have some discussion today, at least about that.
July 13th.
Oh, July 13th. My eyes are bad. I'm looking at this. Yeah. August 1st, so that does say August 2nd, but we learned yesterday that the county has made an error in that, and they want to know by August 1st what our proposed millage rate will be. We have the 2 trim hearing meetings already scheduled on our books. So the first one is September 6th. The second one is September 20th. Hopefully we've got those on your calendar, because it's going to be imperative that we have attendance if we were going to have any type of discussion relative to rollback rates or any other type of scenarios. And then, of course, the budget will go into effect on October 1st. So a little bit of history on the millage rate. I think, as you all know, we have been maintaining a millage rate of 0.8981 since fiscal year 13. So we've been at that rate for a long, long time. And as a result, for a variety of reasons, and I have another slide we can speak to that, we made the decision, you made the decision last year to reduce that millage rate to 0.8508. So at the time, there was discussion that we would consider that reduced rate for maybe 2 years, and then we would consider going back up to the old rate, if you would, 8981. And we'll have a discussion where we are on that, because that is not our recommendation as of today. But this is showing you what the millage rate history is. This is the most recent information we can provide relative to what is it costing the taxpayers relative to the ad valorem, the impact to them for the homeowners. And for 2022, that amount was $178. So for every homeowner in the county, $178 was going towards JWB based on our millage rate that's tacked on to the total millage rate. This is a history of the budgeted ad valorem revenues as well as the fund balance. And I just point out the shaded area versus the solid area. So going back to 2018, we had in the shaded area, which is the top part of the bar graph, we had in our fund balance reserves about $19.5 million. Keep in mind, at the time, our ad valorem revenues back then were $64 million. Now, fast forward up to the blue column. The blue column is what we're projecting or forecasting that we will get for fiscal 24. And that revenue amount, the bottom part of the bar, is $102 million. So over that period of time, our ad valorem revenues has increased from $64 million to $102 million. Now, we've also projected going forward, which is the green bar, what the county is telling us that what they are projecting for increases in property values as well. So based on what they're projecting, those percentages, we're looking at estimated fiscal 28 to be about $121 million. That's double what we had back in 2018. So it's difficult to spend all of that additional money when we've had a history. Well, the history part of it was because of what happened with COVID-19. Folks were not able to spend the money that was allocated to them. So again, looking at this chart, you can see the first couple years, it's pretty stagnant the first 3 years. And then what happened in 2021 when we started to see the increase on the shaded area? And that was because of COVID-19. So what we found is agencies were not spending the dollars that we were providing because they had other incentives, they had other forms of revenues from the federal government and from other areas or other sources, so to speak. And on top of that, the agencies were having a hard time spending the dollars. Some of it was because of staffing. They couldn't hire people, they couldn't retain people, people wanted to work from home, and they couldn't spend the money on participant expenses. Normally they were used to spending the money on sending kids on field trips and so forth. And what we found is that transportation, you couldn't put the kids on the bus, they had to wear masks, a variety of things. So now we're looking again at that blue column, and we were hoping and we were moving towards reducing that excess fund balance, wanting to dip in, if you would, into prior year fund balance. And that's because why are we continuing to get additional revenues? Why are we continuing to use the millage rate that we've had if we can't spend the money and if we continue to grow the reserves? And so the decision was made a year ago that we wanted to reduce the millage rate just for that reason. We're projecting lapse to be a little higher than what we had projected a while ago. So what we are seeing here on the forecast is we would end up with the year fiscal 23 with about, my eyes are bad, $53.7 million in reserve. And for a rainy day fund, you speak to different government agencies and they all have different thoughts and philosophies about that. The state auditor general, they won't come out and tell you what a reasonable amount of reserve is. General rule varies anywhere from agency to agency. 15 to 25% could be a reasonable amount. Our policy here is that we're comfortable and we want a 2-month reserve, cash flow reserve, for our operating expenses, and then we want an additional 1 month for our excess reserves. So when we look at the forecast charts, we focus in on that 1 month additional, which 1/12 would be 8.3%, and we are way above that, but we target to get down to that 8.3%, keeping in mind that we're getting a lot of additional revenues. So this next slide is just to kind of show you a quick how is the budgeted ad valorem revenues having adjusted for inflation. So going back to the fiscal '07, which is the column way to the far left, that was 58.14 million. And then fast forward up to projected 24, based on inflation, that would be 52.34. We still haven't maintained or kept up with inflation relative to, and you can see the graph is just kind of going down and then back up, and now we're starting to see it go back down. So next slide. So I have good news and bad news. So the good news is, based on the changes that we continue to get from the property appraisal relative to the property taxes, we came before the Finance Committee in February of '23, and at the time, we were projecting, or we were hearing from the county, that the increase in property values would be 5.4%. And so we were crunching the numbers based on that percentage. At that time, that would have given us about a $5 million increase in revenues. We went back to the Finance Committee in April, and at that time, we had heard from the county that no, 5.4 isn't going to be where we think it falls out. It's more like 7%. So we're like, okay, 7%. So we crunched the numbers again using 7% as the benchmark for the increase in the property values. And that gave us an overall increase of 7.5 million. Well, lo and behold, last week, Thursday, we get the news from the county, and the county tells us, oh, guess what? We are using 11.77% as our increase in our property values. So 11.77, using a 97% collection rate, would generate $102 million of ad valorem revenues. In comparison with the prior year, that's a little over $10 million in additional revenues. Couple that with what's going on in the market. So in the area of interest, as you know, we've got a lot of money in reserves. We expanded our pools for investments, so now we've got 3 different pools that we are investing our funds. And we are very fortunate to now be getting about 5.1% rate of return. Well, we never dreamed that we were going to be getting $2 million in interest revenues. So what we've done in the forecast is we've kind of used the interest as another indicator, and we've factored in a percentage rate of return. You can see we budgeted $280,000. A year ago this time, people were making 1%. Now we're making 5.whatever%. So based on our proposed budget for fiscal '24, we're using a 4.5% rate of return. We feel that's a comfortable amount. That would generate $2.5 million in earnings. So that change from the prior year would be $2.2 million.
Laura, is that, when I look at under other revenue on beginning fund, and then I go to projected '24 and it says 2.573, is that what I'm seeing? Is that?
That include, the majority of that, 90% of that is interest, yes.
Okay.
The rest of it is a little bit of money from the events that we hold.
Where do I see interest like year to date, or is it just coupled into unassigned fund balance less cash flow reserve, or is there another line I'm missing?
On the budget side, it's in the other revenue.
Okay, so right now we budgeted 141 year to date, and we have 665.
I don't know what you're looking at.
Other revenue.
Are you on the forecast?
Amended to actual. I'm looking at fiscal year '22. Sorry, I should have been clear on that.
Oh,
Not the projected for '23 and '24.
that's the actual from last year, fiscal '22 actual.
Okay.
No, you're not seeing what the current is. The current is in the monthly financial statements that we've provided, and it's showing that we've made $2 million.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Already. So the good news is we've got another $12.9 million to throw at us. The bad news is, next slide, we've worked very hard to put money and dollars into new programs. You can see on the program continuation and the COLAs, we have budgeted $102 million to go to program expenses. Over the prior year, that's an increase of $9 million. We thought we were doing a good job, getting the money out or attempting to getting the money out to the agencies. But of course, we want to make sure that they're accountable, their fiscal responsibilities. We can't just give the money. We want to make sure it's a valid program, they're meeting all the requirements and so forth. Future programming, we're budgeting that at $750. The capital RFA, if you recall, we didn't give a capital RFA money in this fiscal 23 year. We rolled it over to next year, fiscal 24. The total combined amount for those two were $3.25 million. We received our applications a week or two ago on all the RFA applications, and the total amount of the applications we got were $2.9 million. So we went ahead and reduced the budget. Not that we know that we will be awarding all the applicants, because we have to go through the evaluation process and review all the applications and so forth, but we felt like it wasn't necessary to keep the 3.25 in.
Just
Yes.
a sidebar question for the capital. The applications have arrived, but the expenditure wouldn't go out until 2024?
Correct.
Okay, just confirming.
Yeah, and that was why we came to you and had a budget amendment to move it from 23
Correct.
to 24.
To double it up in 24, because we didn't
Correct.
give it out. Okay.
But we were anticipating applications coming in at over the 3.25. And then when we go through our process and evaluation, the first thing we do is the committee will evaluate, and if anything that scores less than 65, they're out, or they're not under consideration. And then we would determine of the remaining applications that fit the number one criteria, are we comfortable with what they were proposing? Did we, is the project something that we wanted to fund? And so, like I said, if we were to fund 100% of the applicants today, it'd be $2.9 million. So moving, and that's a variance of 2.4, and then contingency, we've kind of dropped that. So the bad news, if you want to look at it in that respect, is that we've increasing the expenditures by 11.4 million. And what did I just show you on the previous slide? We're going to be getting additional funds of 12.9. So we're not even dipping into the prior year fund balance reserves. We are just spending the money that we think the additional funds that we will receive in the next fiscal year. On the admin side, we are holding our own. We're seeing a modest increase in salaries of $317,000. We have gone back and looked at the FTEs, and we heard loud and clear at the Finance Committee meeting that said, 7. How did you come up with 7? How did you determine that? We went back to the drawing board and we evaluated where we felt the needs were. And at this time, we have budgeted an increase of FTE of 4 positions. Those positions right now would include a facilities coordinator. As you know, 211 is moving out of that space, and we need somebody to be able to handle that. The IT, that's too much with the turbo babies and all the information and all the materials that we're getting. We needed a facilities coordinator. We're also budgeting for a business system analyst, a community collaborative coordinator, someone who's going to help us with the fatherhood initiative that we're trying to get going. And then also the 4th position that we see a need for is in the program evaluation side for an additional data analyst. So looking at our admin rate, that would put us at 7.13%, and our target is to be below 10%. So we're well within that, and it does include a cost of living adjustment of 6%.
And Laura, does that
Yes.
also include the increase in the retirement FRS?
No, it
Because
does
that has
not.
gone up a
Thank
great
you.
deal. I know
Thank-
5% on special risk, but I'm not sure on regular class.
Thank you. I did have a note on here. So effective July 1, we just learned yesterday, FRS, Florida Retirement System, came out with their newsletter, and they said that there is going to be an increase of the employer's percentage of contribution to the investment plan. So FRS has 2 plans. They have a defined benefit plan and they have an investment plan. So those that are in the investment plan, the employer's contribution is increasing 2% across the board. So if you've got folks that are in the investment plan, I'm in the investment plan here, the contributions from the employer are rising 2%. For the uniform classified areas, which we don't have, like you have, special high risk and some of these others, they have come out with the new rates as well. They range anywhere from 1% to 6%, depending on what category you fall in. The interesting thing is these are effective July 1, next month, because they're on a June 30 year end. So we're going to take a look at how that affects us in our current fiscal year. We're sure we're postured to absorb that increase based on our current budget. And we will take a look to see if there would be any impact relative to fiscal '24. I have to believe it's going to be a nominal amount, but we'll certainly take a look at it. But
So maybe I missed the final bottom line on this. Did you project for the increased retirement? That's not in this budget.
correct.
Thank
It
you.
is not at this time. We just learned it yesterday.
Okay, I got it.
We heard it coming through the grapevine. I kept looking. I kept going to the FRS website. I went to a conference a couple weeks ago for the, and I just wasn't. I mean, I kept hearing it, but hearing it and seeing it signed is one different thing.
Yeah, they just don't change it until the governor signs the bill. Now that he signed it, then FRS takes action. But until that signature's on, they do nothing to bring out
Right.
for it. Yeah.
I think that's a little late, but I wasn't connecting that it had to be signed by the governor before it became official.
Right, and then the other thing is, as I pointed out earlier, they're on a different fiscal year than we are, so they're on June 30 year end, correct. Okay, so I've got two forecasts, and I did have those printed for you and at your table, but the ones on your table, just be careful, because I think the top one you have is not the one I'm recommending at your table. The one below it is, yes. So I want to focus on the one that says continued reduced millage rate. So that's the second one at your desk. So, and the reason I'm calling it that is because if you go down and look at the yellow line, this is where we are proposing that we would keep the millage rate at 0.8508 throughout the rest of this forecast. As I pointed out earlier, with all the additional revenues that we'll be getting on an ad valorem tax basis, you can see up on the top where that change for the tax revenues, as I showed you earlier, if you're looking at the 24 column, is 102 million in revenues. And we just felt like that reduced rate would be more in line with instead of going back to the old rate, which I'll talk to you about that in a minute. Now, we did not endeavor or look into any type of rolled back rate, which is another possibility. We won't know until July, I believe it is, July 1st, what the rolled back rate is that the county would be proposing. We certainly want to take a look at that to see if that's going to be lower than this 0.508 number. We may want to consider, and that's why I wanted some discussion, or at least to throw it out there today. But if we were to keep the reduced rate of 8508, notwithstanding all the other items that are within this forecast, if you look at the green little cell on the far right column, that would be put us at 9.21%. Our reserve for that 1 month would be 9.2, and I mentioned earlier our target is 8.33. So we felt like that got us closer there. So what else is all in this forecast? So in your assumptions on the bottom half, if you go right underneath that yellow line, we have a new line in there called interest rate. So we've added that in there, and we have factored that in. We're using a 4.5% rate of return. And then going forward, I mean, it's the crystal ball. I have no idea what's going to happen with rates, but we went with 4% and then reduced it 3.533. The other assumptions on the bottom are the COLAs. We are factoring in a 6% COLA this year, but going forward, that reduces as well, 4% and then 3% going forward. And we have factored in the new positions. And the other one I wanted to point out would be the lapse projections. So our lapse projections for 23, that's updated on a quarterly basis. Internally, we take a look at the reimbursements that have been submitted and where we are on lapse. And we are projecting right now to finish the year out with a 19.42% lapse. Going forward for fiscal 25, we're budgeting 13%, gradually reducing that to 10, which is what 10 was the acceptable rate before I came on board, which is what you had many, many years ago. Just other things to point out, this would include contingency, future programming. We talked about the capital RFA money. And then the only other thing to point out here is we had added at the beginning of this budget season a line called Workforce Stabilization Program Adjustments. And what our intention there was, after we rolled out the workforce stabilization money and after we started a lot of these new programs, we felt like they needed a period of time to get going and get it, underway. But we felt like we needed to evaluate it and determine if there needed to be adjustments. Meaning, do we need to reduce the amount? Do we need to cut back on something? So that's why you're seeing a negative number in that line. We're projecting at least a $500,000 adjustment in fiscal '25, and then $1.5 million, and then 5 and 5. So we're wanting to be cognizant that some of those programs may not be able to spend all the money that we had provided them, or maybe they were having other issues or concerns. So the other forecast, which is called reduced millage rate, let me see if I got it right. Yeah, through 25, fiscal 25. So this one, if you look again at the yellow bar, we are only projecting the reduced rate, 8,508, for another 2 years, 24 and 25. And then after that time, we would go back to the old rate of 8,981, which is what we all had discussed a year ago. When we go through that scenario, everything else the same, looking at that green bar, we would put us in a 22.96% of our reserve, which is not what your target is. You've been hovering at that amount and higher for a while now, which is what led us to the whole discussion about reducing the millage rate. But that if based on this scenario and based on those projections, that would put us at 22.9%. And you may be comfortable with that. I'm not sure. So the last slide I have here, just to kind of summarize. So we are recommending that you would maintain the current millage rate of 0.8508. That increased amount that we spoke about, the $11 million, would be used to additional 3.2 in COLAs, 2.1 in annualized workforce stabilization, 2.4 in capital RFA, and then 3.7 for annualized strategic aligned programs. So we are trying to relay what the increase would be, how it would be spent. But again, my comment earlier was this is not reducing the prior year reserves. Questions?
Well, I'm confused because you said that the second page, which is to extend the current millage rate through 28, was did I misunderstand that this is what staff was recommending?
Correct.
Okay, good.
Right.
But that's not what we're
Well,
seeing.
the one in the presentation is backwards from the ones that were on your table.
Okay,
So I was trying to rectify
Okay.
that. So
Thank you.
the one I just showed you was not what we were recommending.
okay, but that slide that's up right this minute is also not what you're recommending.
Yes, we are recommending 8,508
Through
For fiscal
for
24.
24.
throughout the rest of the period.
Thank you. That's, I wasn't reading it that way,
Yeah.
but you're suggesting that through FY '28. But that slide
Correct.
is just
Yeah,
talking
and this
about
is
next year.
This is focusing on 24.
Understood. I'm looking
Yeah,
at the
I
full
got it.
forecast.
So I would love to hear conversation, and I know, Mr. McCarrick, you're like,
Yeah, I'm back and forth. First, I'd like to thank the staff for taking the initiative to step out and starting to really look at this for us instead of having us ask you for it. I don't think anyone could project that 11% increase in property values would have been in the cards. And I think we really do have to take a good hard look at where are we, what our funds need to be, and there's nothing locked in stone. The rates that we put in and said to stay for 2 years were really based on the fact that we thought that there could be a downturn in between there, so we were being cautious along the way. We're seeing a different play right now. We need to be able to understand it, really look at where the values are, really look at what's coming ahead of us, and consider the impact that it has on the taxpayers of this county. That's why I think it's extremely important for this upcoming Finance Committee meeting that the Finance Committee gets a chance to really take a good hard look before it comes to the board, because I believe when it comes to the board, there'll be a lot of, I would hope that there'll be a lot of discussion around where we should be and what we should do, with the understanding, I don't think our bottom line premise has changed. We want to reduce that rate of how much money we're just sitting on and holding. We want to make sure that either it's going out to service the children and the communities, or let's look at how we reduce the impact on the taxpayers from it. So thank you for doing what you did. I think it gives us a lot to think about. Again, it's just hard to fathom that increase. I guess we've had a lot of people moving in, buying up high-end properties that are driving numbers up. I'm not sure what those reasons are, but for whatever it is, I think, again, it's so important that the Finance Committee really gets deep into this in this upcoming meeting, and that the board's ready to consider any options. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have a couple of points.
Just,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah.
All right, thanks, Mike. Just for context, the school district's state law requires us to have a 3% reserve. Our board policy is 5%. So to see these reserve numbers is different than what I'm used to. We like to put out this year's money for this year's kids, is what we always say. So I, in general, support the same thing. And for that reason, I think, Laura, you mentioned the rollback rate. I think we should at least look at it and consider it. And I echo what Mike says, either put the money out or reduce the rate, but not build the reserve. And if we're looking at right now saying we're not even going to touch last year's reserve, but we're going to add to it, and that's before lapse or other things, I think that's a concern.
I have a couple of points. One is a very technical question. I was going back to the timeline. When do we have to lock in our millage rate? Is that before or after the July board meeting?
That's at the July meeting.
That's at the
It's our
July
July-
meeting, so that that millage
it's at the
rate
July
can be.
meeting, but then at the trim hearing is when you,
No, I understand, but I
July.
thought on the timeline, you said we needed to report to the
go
county.
back to that.
If you can go back to that slide.
It's,
It was the August 2nd.
keep going.
Yeah, Thank you.
Yeah, that one, yeah.
Okay, because I was thinking
This
about the
year.
timing, because again, I'm just talking about process and timeline right now. I think, yes, the Finance Committee can certainly delve into this, but there are times where we have quorum issues and attendance issues, and I feel bad. I, for one, will not be attending the June meeting in person. I can be on the phone, but it's irrelevant. Okay. So my concern is that July meeting will be pivotal to the conversation and to the decision that we're going to make. And
Correct.
I think debating and discussing, but we're really talking about going from today for the majority of this board and to make that decision at the July meeting. So I'm just thinking about process and timeline first.
I understand.
And I know I had a conversation with Beth and you. So there were two things for me. I continue to be harping on the lapse rate. It doesn't appear to be going in the right direction. And I know it's insignificant when we're talking about the full budget, but I'm going to continue to harp on the lapse rate. I think we have to help our agencies. We contract with them. We expect them to do what we're contracting them for. And I think we have to figure out what we have to do to get that lapse rate spent. Just like our superintendent said, we want to spend that money.
And we are looking into that. We're doing a lot of research and going
Right.
back through the data warehouse to get that information.
Right.
As you had mentioned at the Finance Committee
Yes.
meeting, is there a common thread or a theme?
Yes.
Or is there a
Yes.
particular area, focus area that's lapsing more than others?
Right.
So we are working very hard on that and intend to bring that to the Finance Committee.
Right.
The other thing I just want to point out is, unfortunately, the Finance Committee is June 22nd. We won't have the rollback rate to be able to even discuss that at the Finance Committee.
Right, and that's, again.
Right, but, so we can have the discussion at Finance Committee, but then the rollback rate won't come out to the 1st of July we'll crunch the numbers and we prepared to bring it, and then you'll have the discussion at the July.
Understood, that's why I'm a little concerned about timing.
I
and
understand.
Again, I have a few
Understand.
things coming up, and I'm pretty opinionated about this, shocking. I think you're all pretty surprised about that. I have the third point I want to make. The strategic plan. Our current strategic plan winds down in '25, then a new plan, the evolution of the new plan. I certainly, at a minimum, support the second forecast of the rollback rate all the way out to '28. We'll talk more about an additional rollback rate. For me, and I think how we all feel, is we want the money in the community, and particularly I feel very strongly about additional QELI programs. I'm looking at Barbara. I would love to see a fast forward of our QELI programs, and if that means, keeping the millage rate out to 28 but somehow fast forwarding, getting that money out, used, serving more kids, particularly turbo babies, yes, but the QELI programs for me are vital because it is a guaranteed high-quality program for our kids. 3 points I wanted to make. Thank you so much.
The only other thing I'd add to that is that I think for sure that at the Finance Committee meeting, we need to have the foundation set. There's going to be a lot of moving parts and a lot of balls in the air. I totally agree on the QELI programs. We've got to find out. We've got to find providers that are willing to step up and work. I think that's been part of the major issue that we've had in that space. Somehow we have to find either new providers to step up, people that we could extend and expand with, and expand some of those that are already in play. I'm not sure how fast that happens, but I think it's absolutely important that we do that, along with Turbo Babies, along with other programs, and really take a good hard look. If we have these funds, how do we best spend them in the time frame that we have it? And if we can't, then we've got to really look at how do we provide that relief to the taxpayers. It's senseless to have funds sitting in an account and doing nothing. Yes, Brian.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, again, Laura, your team is awesome. Thank you guys, all the staff. I have always been impressed with our projected outlook and the way it's been organized, but I feel like you all have taken it to the next level and you give us a very clear idea of where we are financially, not just now, but where we think we may be, so it really helps us think strategically. This is, I've come to the conclusion that this lapse and this excess reserve or unassigned fund balance, in large part, it's due to things that have been out of our control, going back to the pandemic, and like you said, going back to new sources of revenue that go into some of these organizations. Having said that, I could not agree more with everything that's been said about, when you look at a government and you say we've got 34% of our expenditures in reserve, we have $56 million in taxpayer money that we have in the bank. You could say, well, that's a really fiscally responsible government, or you could say, man, we got to fix something. Something's wrong, and it's not something we're doing wrong, but it's like Mike said, and like everyone else has said, we got to figure out how to get these funds into the community, and not have them in the bank. And so when I'm looking at this, and this is my end of the year report card, right? Is the way I'm kind of looking at it, because we're basing it off of what happened in 23 and what we think is going to happen in 24. If I'm looking at this and I'm talking to my next door neighbor and he says, "You have $56 million in the bank. Why am I giving you $200 this year?" Don't have a real good response, because I don't have. I love that we've got these workforce stabilization programs in the works. We have things in the works, and I'm so glad we've got our innovation department going and all that. So I think we're going in the right direction, but as we are right now, I don't think I'm going to have a choice but to support the rollback rate, because it's the only responsible thing I think I can do. There's no justifiable reason for us to have $56 million in cash. And I think about how much money that is and how much other use that could go to in this community, whether it's in not-for-profits or other cities. And, I just think I don't see how we can do all the things we want to do and still have a huge reserve next year and be at the rollback rate. So I just don't see any reason to not do that. I know you're gonna have to look at the FRS impact, and I know you're gonna have to get the actual numbers. But the other thing is, I will not be here June 22nd, and so as Ms. Ralston, I also have opinions about this. So you guys know my opinion on it. Unless something drastically changes, I'll be hoping to look at the rollback rate. So thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Jim?
Well, I just want to, regardless of what that rate, when we set that rate in July, that's where your rate needs to be higher. When we get to September, that's when we can set that rate down to the rollback rate and stuff. So I wouldn't be so alarmed about the July rate necessarily as making sure we set it during the trim notice to get it back down where we're looking at. I know that whatever you set that rate at in July, you can't go higher than what that rate is. So if.
July rate is what's gonna go out on the trim notices to everybody in the county.
Right.
That's why that happens. But you're right, you can go lower.
Right, we can always keep reducing it down and keep bringing it down. And I don't disagree with moving the rate down. Obviously, we have a lot in reserve. The one thing I keep in mind with reserves, and I've said this many times, and I can tell you as being a special district expert, we are an independent special district. We are the last people to get FEMA dollars. We don't get it before cities, counties, or school districts. We're the last ones who get that FEMA dollars. We've suffered that in our own fire district already through hurricane tragedies. And so we need to make sure we stay in our budget line of keeping that where we want to keep it at for our reserves. And it is high right now. I do believe we need to bring it down. We just want to be cautious about where we take it to at some point in time. And I like the setup that we gave, the forecast, getting us down to that 9%. I thought was a good job. Thank you very much.
Chief, you just made the point of why it's so important for the July meeting. That we're here and we're ready to really take a good hard look. I think we're all on the same path and the same track. Now we ask staff to come back to us with the reasons behind on your recommendations and which way to go. And also, I would love to see a group of new Quelly programs, if they could come out of the woodwork somewhere, that would be fantastic. I don't have a whole lot of hope for there. That's just unfortunately my opinion. Any other comments or questions?
I have a comment.
Yes.
I think it's
Judge.
important to note, as stated by Mr. Onks, is that we have and we are trying everything within our power to, one, not only serve the children and families in the community, but to make sure that we're good stewards of the money. And we're trying to get the lapse rates to go down, and I do understand what the chief's point is about the what-ifs. I, for one, will not be here at the July meeting due to being out for surgery, so I just needed my point to come across is that I do want to make sure that we take a good hard look at the 0.85, I don't have my glasses, 0.08. And if I am in total agreement right now, all the way out to 2028, but if the team comes back and say, hey, there is some cushion, even though I won't be here if we're gonna vote on it, I just wanna say that I think we should look at if it's possible and fiscally sound to lower it, let's do that, but I know we won't have the numbers that. Right.
So,
I just want to say I will be here for the July meeting. But I do plan on advocating to have a rollback the millage rate. I mean, we've rolled it back 2 years ago now, and we continue to grow with excess funds. And I just think it's kind of, I don't want to adopt the attitude that the more we get, the more we spend, and we're not really spending it just other than just to spend it.
Right.
And that's kind of looking like what we're trying to do.
Exactly.
And we're over $100 million, and it's coming in, and we're coming in with surplus, so there's absolutely no reason to not roll back the rate. I think it's a good time for the taxpayers, because you're getting hit heavy in the increase in property values, and it's hurting a lot of these people that can't handle and do it.
I'm glad to hear that you'll be here in July and that we'll be really focused on it.
we'll be taking a head count soon.
Yeah, we'll be taking a head count, right?
So,
Well, it might go fast if that's the case, because we all are
But
pretty much on the
technically-
same path here.
but from a legal perspective, and I guess this is Colleen, we literally have to be in the room, even if we can be on the phone to vote, we cannot in July. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
Unless you were The Attorney General opinion is unless it's, basically a medical condition
Yeah.
that's preventing you from getting here. But you can, of course, watch on YouTube.
There you go.
Right.
And you
Well,
can
that's,
also
and
avail
I should qualify with my surgery
I
then.
would assume you would
There you go.
qualify, yes, Judge. The other issue, Ms. Ralston, remember, we've talked about this in our board policies, is you can always avail yourself of the one-way communication, and you can send an
Yes.
email to Beth and express your opinion that way,
Right.
and she can print it out and share it during the board meeting.
And
with all the board
ironically,
members.
last July, I was in an airport getting ready to board, and I participated in the meeting, but a one-way communication.
Correct.
So, you know, I looked forward to the debate today about this. So one suggestion from Mrs. Ralston, from me, is that we could consider what we've already done for this year, for 22-23, is roll back for 2 years, keep the lower rate through 28. So keep the lower rate all the way through 28, but possibly another forecast prepared for us, just a thought, as 24-25 rollback rate, and commit to the 2 years. Because one of the things we've said was we hate to go up and down, but we could, and I would support that rollback rate for 2 years, but not all the way out through 28 until we had, again, more information to get there. So, and again, in case I'm not at the meeting, I think today's the day that we get opinions out there.
Good, thank you, yes.
I was just going to point out, we are assuming that the next numbers we get in early July will be something like the numbers we just got, the 11.77. But the fact is, we don't know. And so the last several projections you've gotten have included property value increases of 5.73%, 7%, and then 11.77. Who knows? We could go back and have a 5.73 again. Given where our reserves are, that may not make any difference. I mean, it obviously makes a difference in terms of the revenue, but the decision may still be to look at a rollback, and we will absolutely provide that projection, that forecast, no matter what. For all the reasons that have been said around this table, you have agreement between Laura and I that, as Superintendent Hendricks said, we should be spending this year's money on this year's children and then have an appropriate reserve, but not an extraordinary reserve.
And Ms. Ralston, I just want to clarify that the board has to set the rate every year. So even though they've done a projection based using that rate, if something changes, it's not that you've already voted on it and can't change it.
And I do understand that, and I think we all feel the same way. We want the money in the community. We want it spent with accountability, and for us, the frustration is it's not being spent as quickly as we want, and so I get that. And back to Mr. Ong's point, it's irresponsible of us to have that much reserve without being accountable ourselves to roll that back. And as much as I made my point, more QELI programs and get them out there, I think today's debate is the reality. I always feel like I can push, we can do it. But the reality is we should not be sitting on these dollars. And I absolutely support the rollback. And I think from a planning perspective, what's comfortable for me is to go back to 2 years, which would take us through the strategic plan we're under, so that we're focusing on the strategic plan. Still, I'm asking the staff to push to get more dollars out there and do what we have to do to spend it. But I also would like not to roll back for the whole thing, because as we plan our next strategic plan, how do we know what's going to be ahead for us and expected of Juvenile Welfare Board to put money in the community in a way that we haven't even thought of right now, that in 2026 could be very, very different. And there may be different people at this board. So we are sending a message with our decision-making in how this board that's sitting here right now feels, because life changes and we may not be here, but I represent Bob and Bernie, who are not here, and I have been on this board for a long time, and I want us to make sure we're delivering services for today, thinking about the future, being fiscally responsible and holding ourselves accountable.
Yes, sir.
I have a question for Colleen. Could you remind us, if we were to go with the rolled back rate, what the supermajority vote is? I kind of,
Okay, so I don't have the statute in front of me, and maybe Chief Milliken has it memorized, but to go to the rolled back rate, we would still need the majority of the board. And right now, we have an 11-member board, even though we have 10 members. So we would need 6 affirmative votes for this rolled back rate. And then at the next step, which is where we've been at certain times in the past, we need 75% of the board, which is 8 people, because you can't have a half person. And then there's even a higher rate where you would need a unanimous vote of the board. And I don't recall the percentages, but Laura and her team, when they get the DD 214, they do the math, and then Diana tells me, okay, here are the numbers for the votes, and that's why in certain years past, we have been, many years ago, I think I'm talking about 2008 right now, when we were down board members, had to look at what we could even get as a vote based on the number of board members seated.
right. Thank you.
And so it's, which makes quorum in September even more important. Because
Correct.
because we'd have to have 6 people in the room or 8 people in the room for a majority or for a supermajority, all voting.
We need 6 yes votes, no matter what. We need 6 bodies in the room to even have a meeting. And then depending on what the numbers are, you may need 8 affirmative votes to pass the millage you want. Once the numbers come out, we'll know.
Would that be for both trim hearings, the 6th and the 20th?
Okay,
September?
We faced this last year, and the indication that I believe Diana got from Tallahassee was that it was absolutely a yes at the second, at the final.
The 20th.
Yes, and that there might be some wiggle room on that at the first hearing, because that's the preliminary. But obviously, you know, we would prefer, if we're gonna need 8 votes, we would prefer to have 8 at both meetings, but Tallahassee has indicated the super is necessary at the last meeting.
And 8 out of 10 is a lot. We got 10 members.
That would not be for the rollback rate, right? That would be for maintaining the current rate, which technically is a tax increase based on the value going up, right?
Based on that, that is probably an accurate statement. We'll know more.
So rollback rate's gonna only be 6, no matter what.
Okay. So regardless of all the legal issues that may come about, which I doubt there will be any, Beth, you and the team, and Laura, you have, I think, a pretty straight direction from this board as to where we want to go and what we want to see coming forward. So I'll leave you to that. Thank you so much.
We will work very diligently to accomplish that. Thank you.
Okay. Moving on, the legislative report. Rebecca, you're here.
Good morning. It's still morning. It is a pleasure to be here and give you all a legislative update. For those of you who I don't know, I'm Becca Teeter, and I have the privilege of serving as the Director of Public Policy now for almost 2 years for the Juvenile Welfare Board. Here's what we're going to do today. We're going to take a look at what's going on. We're going to look at a couple top line items. Our goals are going to look at the legislative statistics related to the Juvenile Welfare Board and the business in which we're in, some legislative trends of note, many of which, as Ms. Ralston mentioned, align with our strategic plan, and bills that have been signed into law and some appropriations that we think you will find particularly salient. What do our session numbers look like? Our lower and upper chamber they filed 1,828 bills, passing 356 through both chambers. The number of bills filed is actually much lower than years prior, but the number of bills passed is exponentially higher. So I think it's an opportunity to say that our legislation and our legislators in Tallahassee were exceptionally effective. What that means for us with inside JWB is we are looking at an enormous amount of legislation, which is wonderful, I must say, on the job training, and has been successful because of our internal practices and all the experts in which I have access to. What are some of the trends we're seeing? None of this should come as a huge surprise, but there is a remarkable amount of legislation related to children's mental health, early learning access, and I don't just mean the actual programs, but how can we get it into the hands of more people? And there's a lot of legislation directly relating to our partners' core focus areas, such as the Early Learning Coalition, which I've had continual conversations with Ms. Carson, as well as our school district, which I've had ongoing conversations with members of the school board, as well as Superintendent Hendrick. Some legislation of interest. I have two pieces, and I have copies of all of this if anyone wants more of it. Two of which are signed, two of which we, our fingers and toes crossed, will be signed. The first one is the prohibited applications on government-issued devices. That is colloquially known as the TikTok bill, if you will. But what it really does is it allows us to, and requires us to block sources from countries of concern such as Iran, Russia, China, certain web locations such as TikTok. But fundamentally what we're doing, and I give much credit to the fact that we are really we were on top of this before it was even signed, is we're waiting to get the list of prohibited sites from DMS in Tallahassee, and IT has been in constant communication with BTS to make sure we are compliant as soon as that is issued. And we have 15 days upon it being issued, which it has not yet done. The second piece is the Professional Counselors Licensure Compact. That is also signed. That expands on the work that Representative, now Chairperson Koster, put forth last year. This enables the ongoing expansion of telehealth in the mental health space, and it allows us to join a 26-state licensure compact, which just gives us more professional resources to those who may need mental health. And so that is considered quite compelling. The two pieces yet to be signed are the Florida Kids Care Program eligibility. This is a priority bill for Speaker Renner, and so we are excited for that, but we're also excited for what it means. I've had conversations with many of you one-on-one about the impact of the minimum wage. And in committee, they spoke about how over 30%, according to the Florida Chamber, of individuals who have received a promotion have had to decline them. And we certainly don't want that for our families. So what this does is it expands the eligibility for kid care up to 300% over the federal poverty limit, effectively allowing our families to move towards prosperity and independence while not suffering a healthcare lapse. And the last bill, and again, we have copies of all this, are trauma screening for children removed from caregivers. This allows and asks for an immediate assessment, but a maximum of 21 days before an assessment is completed to make sure that children receive as little trauma as possible from these very difficult situations. And so because we work so closely, obviously, with our state attorney, with our juvenile judges, school district, et cetera, we're paying close attention to see where these things might intersect. Appropriations of note. Now, there's this asterisk up there because these are currently included in the General Appropriations Act, but it is all subject to our governor's veto as well as his final approval. So they currently live there and we are happy about it, but until my governor tells me otherwise, this is in pencil, not pen. The first I feel is pretty exciting to this board and happy to report on it is that PEMS has a $2.5 million appropriation for a children's crisis stabilization unit. It's almost like they were paying attention to Mr. Ongst when he expressed a desire for more beds. This will improve their ability to serve an additional 33% of children, or what would equal 536 individual visits. The next one, and that was put forth by Senator DeSigley, so thank you, sir. The second one is a 1.5 cumulative appropriation for a park children's services building. That was put forth by Senator DeSigley and the Honorable Representative Cheney, and so we are excited about what that would mean, and that is a very, as I understand it, a quite seasoned, which is a nice way of saying it's been with us for quite some time in this community building, and so this is a great opportunity to meet these needs. And a lot of these pieces that we've highlighted today are not directly in areas in which we can make investments, but we know we can make better investments when our Capitol buildings are in good shape, for example. The next one I think is really exciting. Becky and I were actually just looking at it in the corner, which is the Applied Mental Health Certificate for law enforcement. And what that means, and I will, without hyperbole, it allows us to work with first responders in a really meaningful way to, and this will be the first of its kind, but to help them, you think about the Sleep Baby Safely. There's not a first responder that I've spoken to that I don't broach the topic of finding a deceased child that we didn't have to lose, that I don't see their face go white. And so these address those types of things, and it's an opportunity to help us help the people we need the most. And that was also put forth and made it into the budget by Representative Cheney. And the last one is one that was born here at the board table, which is to look at the Sanderlin NFC Family Service Center, a design project to get them a new building. And so we thank Senator Roussan for including that in the budget. And that was born out of Beth's leadership and some of the conversations that we had in Tallahassee. So we are quite pleased to see that end up in the GAA, our first time at bat.
Becca, the SPC, what's that acronym for? For the
St. Petersburg College.
St. Petersburg College.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. That was an easy one. I appreciate it, Mrs. Ralston. May that set the standard for questions. What will we be doing in my realm in July? Although it sounds like y'all will be quite busy, so it may come to you in written form to be determined based on what we know. Once the budget is finalized, and I will mention that we are pleased that none of the items we are highlighting here were identified by Tax Watch as a turkey, but we will report back the gross impact once we can look at it a little more closely and it is actually final and not hyperbole. I yield the floor to any questions you might have.
Any questions, anyone? No, it sounds like we had a very productive time in a time that we expected it to be slow.
Oh, and I do have copies of all the appropriations and some summaries for your consumption, should you like them. Thank you very much.
Okay, moving on to the Chief Executive Officer's report.
Thank you. Well, first, I want to congratulate JWB CFO Laura Kruger-Brock, and I think we have a picture here, Tampa Bay Business Journal's CFO of the Year in Government and Regulation category, and there she is. She was recently honored at the Business Journal's award luncheon and in their print and online publications, acknowledging her 40-plus years of leadership and service. Laura's acute understanding of government auditing, accounting, budgets, and forecasts, coupled with her nonprofit and board experience, made her a natural fit as JWB CFO. And under her leadership, JWB received our first GFOA award in financial reporting. Excellence, a designation we went on to receive 3 years in a row. During the pandemic, Laura led the way to keep the doors open and staff employed for JWB's funded agencies, and afterwards an annualized forecasted $7.9 million to help stabilize their workforces. Last year, she led a monumental funding opportunity for new strategically aligned programs, and this resulted in $6.5 million in new dollars invested by JWB to address unmet needs of children and families countywide. Moreover, Laura is a staunch advocate and a mentor for her staff, and she's a leader and a role model among her peers. Throughout her life, Laura has taken great pleasure in finding opportunity to use her skills and acquired knowledge to give back to both her community and to her profession. And Laura, please stand at your seat so we can honor you again as CFO of the Year.
I just want to thank you for nominating me and all the good work that JWB does. I'm just happy to be here and be a part of it. Thank you.
And I knew Laura would say, oh no, all of this is teamwork and I didn't do all this by myself, and which is all true, but her leadership's extraordinary and we've benefited greatly from it, as have the kids. Let's see, we want to to also congratulate, again, because we have something fun to show, the Honorable Bruce Bartlett. Gotta wake up here. No, I'm just kidding. Congratulations again to Bruce Bartlett for receiving the Tampa Bay Lightning Community Hero Award for his passionate support of CASA and its Family Justice Center, which supports survivors with victim advocacy, civil legal attorneys, government victim assistance, prosecutors, law enforcement, and more, especially all in one place. And I want to give a shout out over here. We have Loriana Forsyth, CEO of CASA, in the house here, always wanting to, as I have found, praise Bruce's part in leadership in this regard. So Bruce's efforts have been vital in ensuring that court sentencing is established and strengthened for survivors of domestic violence, which improved accountability and reduces the likelihood that repeat violence will happen or that violence will escalate. The award was presented during a Lightning home game in April, and we have a short video that we'd like to share.
Hi, I'm Brandon Hagel, and it's my privilege to introduce tonight's community hero. Domestic violence is a silent menace, but Bruce Bartlett is on a mission to make it loud and clear. A state attorney for the 6th Judicial Circuit of Florida, Bruce has also been a tireless advocate for the Family Justice Center at Community Action Stops Abuse, or CASA, an organization that provides safety and sanctuary to domestic violence survivors and their children. CASA's Family Justice Center consolidates key services all under one roof, such as law enforcement, attorneys, and mental health professionals. Funds from tonight's grant will help CASA continue to provide expanded critical assistance, helping victims break the silence, take a stand, and refuse to lose. That's why you, Bruce, are a hero. Before the game, it was our privilege to present Bruce with a $50,000 grant for his designated charity, Community Action Stops Abuse. Please welcome tonight's community hero, Bruce Bartlett.
The person behind the curtain that moves all things that happen. Without her, we wouldn't have it.
Well, I'm going to give her the opportunity to make another announcement. Do you want to do that, or do you want me to? I'm ready, so I'll say it. But as you can tell, Bruce is always very modest about his role, but I know in talking to Loriana, it took all of those people from each of those walks of life, so to speak, that impact a domestic violence victim. And Bruce has been not just drug there, but energetically there at the table, helping to make that happen, to make this system work better for victims of spousal abuse. So, just because we have CASA on the brain, we also wanted to mention that CASA Pinellas recently received or won the national prestigious Purple Ribbon Award for Outstanding New Service Launch for launching Florida's only Family Justice Center in Pinellas County last October. And CASA is the only certified domestic violence organization in Florida to be so recognized. And I just think it's important for us to know this is a best practice nationally. And how many other such family justice centers exist, Loriana? Do you know that number? I don't know the exact number, but it's over 100. Okay. But the first and only in Florida at this point in time. So it's exciting. It took a lot of advocacy, fundraising, everything else to make that happen. So, okay, well, much less exciting, but a little bit of business relative to JWB. Wanted to mention to you, just so you've heard it once, we're having really significant difficulties internally with two of our database systems. Our evaluators and our fiscal analysts really depend on these significantly to do their work on an everyday basis. And we're in the process of working hard and attempting to be tough to get results with the vendors at this point in time. But you may hear back from us on changes we may need to make. It's early to say that, but just wanted you to know. Another more fun is summer book. It's time for Summer Book Bus. And since 2016, JWB's partnered with the Pinellas County Schools on the Summer Book Bus, an initiative born from our grade level reading campaign designed to combat summer learning loss and instill a love of reading for kids. Last year, JWB gave away 9,000 books to 4,500 kids at 70 stops across the county, thanks to our dedicated volunteers, many of them who were board members and community members. So JWB has been and will be on the road with Book Bus for 3 weeks this summer. We finished our first week last week, and then we have 2 weeks in July. These are weeks that the county is not using their Book Bus, and so we go to where the younger kids are, the itty-bitties, as some of us say. And so if you're interested in volunteering, please let Becca Teeter know, and she'll work with you to select a date and a location that works for you. They're literally all over the county at different times. So there's probably a date and a place that will work. The kids are over the moon excited when they get to pick out books. And, sometimes they're a little scared to get, these are 2, 3, 4-year-olds. They're sometimes scared to get on this bus, but then once they got on and their eyes get real big and they get to see the books that they get to choose, that they get to take home, it's fun to be a part of. Would like you to save the date. Our Club Child Care Happy Workers ribbon cutting will be occurring. The Early Learning Academy is a model preschool serving children birth to age 5. The Academy is part of our early childhood development portfolio of newly funded strategically aligned programs. So just within this last year, you have provided some of the funding to make sure this happens. That ribbon cutting will be Monday, July 17th from 9 to 11 at the Happy Workers Early Learning Academy in St. Pete. Tours and refreshments will follow the ceremony, and we'll be sending you a formal invitation after today's meeting. But I know this group is especially excited about early learning opportunities, and we're happy to see this occur. And, it's never too early to plan, so save the date. JWB's annual Kids First Awards Luncheon, yes, we just had one, but for next year, will be Friday, April 26th from 11:30 to 1 at the Coliseum in St. Pete. We invite you to thank you first for being honorary hosts this last year, and we hope you'll do the same this next year. And we invite you to continue your service on the host committee and save that date. And we will send you out calendar invites after the meeting. And that's all I have.
Well, thank you. Moving on to informational items, do we have any comments, questions, or anything that we want to review under information? Seeing none. Now open agenda. Do we have any public? No public cards. Then I'll leave it up to Mr. Butler to talk about our anniversaries.
Okay. Start with Sarah Smith. 2 years. Is Sarah in here by chance? No? Okay. How about Julia Burgeon? And she's been with us for 2 years also. Kelly Grossman, 4 years. And Stacy Gill, 4 years. Richard Godfrey, 10 years. And the old timer, 30 years for Laura Peel. And that's all I got.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. And Danielle, I think we have our honoree here.
We do, thank you. Rachel Glander has been with JWB volunteering for over 3 years. And of course, right after we finished the presentation, she arrived and she made every effort to be here early and was up very early this morning, earlier than I can imagine, to get ready. So we want to thank Rachel for her dedication and for being here. And now that Joanna is also in the room, I just want to recognize that Joanna is our volunteer coordinator here at JWB. So if you have anyone interested, you can send them her way. And when we talk about the book bus, all that happens because of Joanna's coordination efforts. So thank you, Joanna, for all that you do as well.
Okay. Again, thank you for your ongoing volunteer services. It's well appreciated by this board and I'm sure by the community. If there are no other items to be brought up to this board, I will call a meeting to adjourn.